Howdy folks, Dr. Will Wong here. In our company's last newsletter, we asked for folks to send in suggestions on topics they'd like to hear me speak on, or subjects that they'd like to hear me elaborate on. And let's cover some of those questions tonight. First one is numbness in the fingers of both hands. Wow, that's an interesting one. Could be C7, T1 subluxation at the spine. Could very well be that. Could be the result of post-herpetic neuralgia, which is long-term shingles. You know, shingles doesn't always present with the sores, doesn't always have the extreme pain, although it usually does. Some folks don't get the sores. Some folks don't get the extreme pain. They get mild pain. They may have paresthesia, which is tingling, like pins and needles. They may have numbness. The easiest way to figure out if you have shingles or long-term shingles, post-herpetic neuralgia, is to get a blood test for the antibodies of herpes zoster. So you get your herpes zoster titers done, and if they're high, then yes, you probably have shingles. Now, for the generation of you that never got chicken pox, you're going to get shingles anyway because you got the live chicken pox virus with the chickenpox inoculation that you were forced to get as a kid. And the stupid folks out there who are getting the anti-shingles vaccines because some doctor or pharmacist told them it was a good thing to get, because the FDA told them on their ads on TV that it was a good thing to get, usually within 2 weeks of getting the vaccine, just like within 2 weeks of getting the flu shot, guess what? You're right. These folks have shingles. Last thing it might be is a condition called Raynaud's, which is a circulatory condition where the blood vessels begin to constrict and restrict blood circulation to an area. It takes a doc to look at your hand and to test for circulation to confirm a case of Raynaud's syndrome. So take those three things and get your chiropractor to check your C7, T1. Go get blood tested for the herpes zoster antibodies, and while you're getting your blood test, have the doc check you out for Raynaud's syndrome. Now, the next question is part of a series of questions, but I'm only going to address bits and pieces of them. I'm not going to address all of them, and I'll tell you why. This fellow wants to know what I think of three different nutritive elements, nutritive substances that are currently used for weight loss. I don't think any more of these three things for weight loss than I did of ephedra back when that was used for weight loss, or any other gimmick that was used for weight loss. What was it? Back 40 years ago. Wait a minute, I'm trying to remember. It was choline, kelp, and something else that was sold to enhance weight loss. Might have been iodine. No, wait a minute, there's iodine in the kelp. Whatever it was. None of those things worked then. They don't work now. Folks are still looking for that magic button. When Prozac promised that it would help people lose weight, millions of folks got on it just to dump some weight. Nothing happened except they screwed up their brains pretty damn badly. Theoretically, yes, the kelp increases your iodine, which increases your thyroxine output, which increases your metabolic rate, and the choline increases your rate of burning fat and blah, 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 blah. And supposedly all this stuff together really increases your ability to lose weight. Didn't work back in 1967. Didn't work all the way through the 70s. And when they died in the 80s, and it's really surprising to me, boy, the nutritional industry must be really hard up for new things to sell. They've never found another St. John's wort that sold almost as well as Prozac did. They must be damned hard up if they've gone back to all the old stuff from the 1960s that didn't work. But you've got a couple of generations between now and then, and you got a new bunch of gullible folks who are looking to lose weight the easy way without diet and exercise, so they want the magic pill. Now, this fellow also asked me about CoQ10 and N-acetylcysteine. Okay, I like N-acetylcysteine because it turns into Glutathione. I hate CoQ10 because CoQ10 is very, very expensive, and it does nothing that vitamin E does not do. That he even asked this question shows that he hasn't listened to my old shows. I rag on CoQ10 to all get out because it's almost exactly, their claims are almost exactly what research found, especially Dr. Tom Curitin's research at the University of Southern Illinois found, that vitamin E did in doses above 400 international units for the heart, for circulation, and for everything else. Let me let you in on a secret. When vitamin E was very expensive, pressed from wheat germ oil, the industry loved it. The health food industry sold gobs of it at a very high profit margin, because everyone wanted to get their heart right with the vitamin E, or they wanted to have better sex because vitamin E protects the prostate. But then when, I think it was Letterly, came up with a way of synthesizing vitamin E, of creating vitamin E by fermentation. Mind you, it's not artificial. You're not blending chemicals in a test tube to make vitamin E, the way that the industry would love to make you think, oh, the synthetic vitamins are so bad. Synthetic vitamins are all created via fermentation in vats. Last time I checked with God, fermentation was still a natural process. So they made really inexpensive, relatively inexpensive anyway, vitamin E that actually worked, and they sold it fairly cheap, cheaper than the health food industry had been selling the stuff from cold-pressed wheat germ oil, and all of a sudden the nutritional industry wasn't interested. They were looking for something else that they could mark up. So all the different kinds of CoQ10 up to ubiquinol, which is supposed to be the ultimate CoQ10, doesn't do anything that vitamin E didn't do back in the 1960s. Period. The cycle which the nutritional industry uses to present, or rather to represent products, mimics the publishing cycle a lot, which anyone who publishes a magazine on a specialty item like off-road trucks or mechanics or whatever knows that they're going to get the newbies come in, and for about 2 to 2.5 years, these people are going to buy every issue they can publish and learn all sorts of stuff. But they've only got about enough information to keep them interested for about 2.5 years before the information starts kind of repeating itself. And the publishers know, the editors know, that the publishing cycle is about 2.5 years long. Oddly enough, that's about as long as born-again Christians last. They really convert strongly to the faith. They go to the church, and for about 2.5 years, they hang around, and then they start lapsing. After about 2.5 years, I don't know if they go back to be reborn again, but they start lapsing and they start not attending church as much because they've heard the stories before. And this happens with the yakety-yak churches, with the non-liturgical churches. That depends on keeping people interested with stories and stuff, which is why some pastors really go overboard. But I'm getting away from my point here. My point is that the nutritional industry, just like the publishing industry, knows it has cycles, and the cycles are generational. So with newer generations of folks coming up, as they are now, we see the cycle of nutrients to do, let's say, antioxidant work, and to strengthen the eyes, and to strengthen the immune system, and to work on the nervous system, and to do this, and to lose weight, and all the popular stuff. And the really serious supplements that can truly change a person's life and positively affect health are not spoken much about, or are given a back row, because the emphasis for most nutritional companies is in making cash. And right now, that most of the bigger nutritional companies have been bought out by big pharma or big agri companies. Last thing in the world they want you to do is to actually get well from what you're taking. So, for example, when one particular company back in 1999 that has a gold label on it sold out to Monsanto for $3 billion, I can't blame the guy for selling. He was in his 70s, wanted to get out from under the company. I get it. But as soon as they bought the company, they changed all the formulas. Soy went into everything, with all the side damage that soy can do. And by the way, going back to vitamin E for just 1 second before I forget. The problem with the fermented vitamin E was that vitamin E has to be stabilized in an oil. And the oil of choice for most of the nutritional industry has been soy. Why? Because it's the cheapest crap to get. But the only thing cheaper is canola. But soy oil is so laden with estrogen that folks inadvertently are taking tons of estrogen while they're taking their vitamin E. There are only 2 companies in the U.S. at present that offer an absolutely, positively guaranteed non-estrogenic vitamin E. AC Grace from Sugar Land, Texas, and Wham Essentials, my company, with our dry E. Dry powdered vitamin E doesn't have to be suspended in an oil to keep it from deteriorating. It's freeze-dried, and not being suspended in an oil, it is estrogen-free. So going back to what I was saying before, one of the first things that big pharma or a big agri company firm does when they buy a nutritional product is that they reformulate most of the products that are sold to look like they've got the same ingredients, and they might have much of the same ingredients, but they might lower the grade of the ingredients. For example, there's agricultural grade, food grade, and there's pharmaceutical grade. You want your stuff to be pharmaceutical grade because the absorption of the other stuff is pretty damn poor. So is the quality. They also, like Monsanto did with that gold label company, start putting in things you may not want in your nutritional supplements. Now, here's where I get into the argument about not needing fillers or excipients, and I will remind everyone that anyone who makes the claim that their supplements don't have fillers or excipients is outright lying to you, or they're an idiot because they don't read the batch reports of what goes into their products. They've never had their products independently tested. I will tell you flat out, the machinery does not exist to create either a nutritional supplement, an over-the-counter drug, or a standard drug, a prescription drug, without the use of the stuff to keep the ingredients from gumming up. Nutritional supplements, vitamins, herbs, enzymes are sticky as heck, and you need the same stuff that you put into making a cake to make it not stick to the machinery that you're blending it in, to the machinery that you're encapsulating or tableting it with. So you have to use flow agents and excipients. You try to use the safest ones you can find, but regardless, they're still going to be there. Anyone who claims to have a flow agent or excipient-free supplement needs to show you the certificate from an independent lab, not their own in-house home lab, but an independent lab to prove that there are no such things in their supplements. The last supplement that I saw tested had 10% of something that they swore wasn't anywhere near their supplement. And the doc who invented the excipient and flow agent-free idea herself was shown to have been gullible, to put it mildly, when one of her customers actually did send her products to be independently tested, and they found all sorts of stuff in it. She got real quiet about all the super pure stuff she had been harping on up to that time and passed away soon afterwards. But again, it is impossible. The machinery does not exist to create a nutritional supplement, a medication, or anything else that needs to be encapsulated or tableted without the use of excipients and flow agents. Also, consider this. If you've got 15 milligrams, as in the standard zincs, okay? Standard zinc is 15 to 30 milligrams. You know how small 15 to 30 milligrams is? But yet, you get a capsule, and it's full of stuff. Even if it's a tiny capsule, it's still full of stuff. Well, 15 to 30 milligrams, even in the smallest capsule available, wouldn't fill up the 1/3 of the bottom of the capsule. Would you like to get a capsule that's almost empty? Wouldn't you complain to high heaven if you got a capsule that was almost empty? So if you know something has as little as 30 milligrams of something in it, What do you think is taking up the rest of the space in that capsule? I'll let you ponder over that for a while. Now, the next question is, what do I think of serrapeptase only in a systemic enzyme product? And I'll say serrapeptase is usually pretty good as long as the raw material used is a pharmaceutical-grade serrapeptase and not a food-grade, and God, not an agricultural grade one meant for livestock feed. But we know from the work done by Dr. Max Wolf. Max Wolf is the father of systemic enzyme therapy. He's the one who studied systemic enzyme for 30 to 40 years at Columbia University between the late 1920s to early 1930s to 1973 when he passed away. Max Wolf was an MD with 7 PhDs after the MD, and he found that enzymes work better in combination because their fields of influence overlap. Think of an enzyme as a Chinese fan. And that Chinese fan is the field which that particular enzyme eats. Enzymes eat things. And each enzyme has its own particular field. It may overlap a bit with the next enzyme. It may not. Maybe further away. It may eat something different. But not all enzymes eat the same thing. So he found that the strongest effect from enzymes was had when you blend them together. And he put together the original formula of a systemic enzyme, which was the original Wobenzyme formula, not exactly the formula that's being sold now as Wobenzyme. Original formula was a bit different. I'm way familiar with that formula because I'm the one who made it famous in the U.S. I'm going to take kudos for that. It was only selling at $55,000 a year for the 10 years before I started talking about it. I started chatting it up, talking about all of the things that systemic enzymes could do on radio shows, on television, in print, and their sales went up to about $8 million a year for a few years after that, until the owner of the company in Germany, Mucos Pharma, who is Dr. Ronsberger, passed away. But that's getting off the track. So Wobenzyme was the first blend of proteolytic enzymes meant to cover a wide variety of different substrates. The substrate are the things that the enzymes eat through, and the wider the variety of things that an enzyme eats through, the greater its potential to work against things like inflammation and fibrosis. So you'll find that all these solo enzymes, the solo nattokinase, the solo serrapeptidase, the solo pancreatin, don't work as well as when you blend those enzymes together to have their effects overlap and work on a broader range of proteins to affect. So again, yes, the serrapeptidase, as long as it's a pharmaceutical-grade serrapeptase, is great. But it would be better if it were mixed in with some other enzymes to help it along and act on a wider field of proteins. And lastly, I'm going to have to paraphrase this one a good bit because of the people involved. I was asked what a woman could do to keep her husband. This gal has been going through a tremendous fight with postpartum depression and some other hyperestrogen issues. Plus, she's having a hellacious premenopause roller coaster with her hormones. You know, this is a time when gals lose interest in sex. They really don't want sex. They're afraid of getting pregnant again. They may be nursing or taking care of some children and small children. They want to concentrate on their kids. Thoroughly understandable. But sex is the last thing on their mind. Some gals actually find sex disgusting. We'll talk about why in a little bit. But they go from being reluctant at having sex. For some reason, they don't enjoy sex anymore. They have no libido. They have no desire. Vaginas start going dry. Clitorises don't get engorged anymore, so they go kind of numb. They're armor-plated. They don't feel much. The number of times a couple has sex reduces down from every night of the week to just some nights of the week, to just some nights a month, to just once a month, to just a few times a year. till finally the gal just allows the guy to get his rocks off, isn't a participant in the lovemaking at all. She's better than a sex doll, waiting for the guy to finish, and the man feels the rejection. This is when most guys are blamed for having midlife crises and get their sports cars and start looking for the long-leggy, busty blonde. The guy just wants his wife back. He wants what he had with his wife back. Very, very simple. Men are very, very simple. If they were a stereo receiver, they would have one light and one switch. That's it. Women would have 100 lights and 100 switches and 100 dials. I keep on telling folks that my men's book was it was 78, 80 pages long. Gets to the point, bang, that's it. My woman's book is over 400 pages long without the pictures, is on its third revision and will likely never be published. That's how complicated gals can get. But I reminded this gal that after childbirth, her estrogen is up, because estrogen has to go up in order for birth to happen. Estrogen is basically a miscarriage when you've come to term, okay? Her progesterone is non-existent. Progesterone is a hormone that kept her really happy, especially throughout second trimester of pregnancy. Woman couldn't be depressed during second trimester of pregnancy if her progesterone was right. And if it wasn't, she's in dreadful fear of miscarriage, if it isn't. And along with the increase in estrogen, which makes a gal cranky, hold water, have mood swings, and put on water weight and fat weight, along with that, she has a great increase in prolactin, the breast milk making hormone. And even if she doesn't breastfeed, she still has an increase in prolactin. And those increases in prolactin don't actually go down much in between each baby. So with each successive baby, the level of prolactin in the brain goes higher and higher and higher until sex is disgusting. Yeah. And the thought of all the things that would have turned her on or brought her to orgasm when she was between, let's say, 17 and 27, now after 2-3 kids and plus 35, she thinks are gross and awful. What holds couples together is the same thing that brought a couple together in the first place: oxytocin. The oxytocin release in an orgasm bonds couples together. When a woman has a baby, she has an oxytocin release equal to a few thousand orgasms. And she was having an oxytocin release even before the child came out, because oxytocin is what caused the contractions to cause her to give birth. So she begins secreting oxytocin to get the contractions. Baby's born. She has this huge, over-the-top Mount Everest or to the moon oxytocin release that bonds her to the child for life. And then, with each breastfeeding, she makes more oxytocin. Some gals even report feeling guilty because they're having little mini orgasms while they're breastfeeding. Perfectly normal. It's the oxytocin release. God's way of bonding you to your child. But in a couple, what brought you together and what kept you together the first 4 or 5 years, when most marriages are great, was a constant renewal of the oxytocin bond between a man and a woman. And then after the first child came, there was a bit more distancing and a little bit less sex. After the second child, even more distancing and less sex. If you have 3 or more kids, there's even more distancing and less sex, to the point where gal doesn't want to have sex anymore. So, the gal doesn't want to have sex. The husband wants to. The oxytocin bond between them is not being renewed. Therefore, their link, their bonding, is coming apart. And this is where gals start thinking, well, I've got him. He's married to me. I've got his kids. Legally, he's supposed to take care of us. All the poor guy wants is to have his life back with his wife back the way it used to be, but that'll never happen. And men are told flat out that it will never happen. So with the oxytocin bond gone, guy's not going to hang around. Most men won't. Religion, the law, and everything else aside, most men will walk, or they will do what men were known to do back in the old days when their wives turned them away. They would get mistresses, and their wives were happy to let their husbands have mistresses. They didn't have to go through divorce. Things didn't get messy. The guy was happy having sex with his shiksa mistress somewhere that he kept in an apartment or a house somewhere in another city or in another part of the city or whatever else, and everything was fine. I've actually had in-laws whose parents had histories of that. Men want to feel cuddled and loved and still important to their wives, as they did when the marriage first happened, when the love affair first happened, when the couple first got together, the first 5 years. Remember the first 5 years of your marriage. After premenopause kicks in around 35, that's all history. But gals, if you don't renew the oxytocin bond with your husband, there's a real danger that your marriage is not going to last. That the legalisms and religiosity that you're depending to hold your marriage together will not hold it together, especially these days. So if you want to hold your man, if you want to keep your marriage, if you want to have your guy love you and fight for you and work for you as hard as he did the first 5 years you were together, keep on renewing the oxytocin bond. Take the progesterone cream, get on testosterone replacement, do anything you need to lower the amount of estrogen you're making, because you're estrogen dominant as soon as you hit perimenopause, to lower the amount of prolactin that you've got in your head that's making sex disgusting for you. Bring your hormones back to what they were when you were 21, when you were horny as heck. Good breeze on your skirt could get you going way back then, remember? Take the nitric oxide creating amino acids like citrulline, like arginine, or like my dimethylglycine, trimethylglycine supplement to help renew the lubrication in your vagina, to make the vagina wet again, and to help renew the circulation to your clitoris so that it gets engorged and feels positive sensations during sex. If you've gone into menopause and you're taking the nitric oxide creating amino acids, you might also ask your doc for a prescription for daily Cialis, because that's the stuff that keeps the nitric oxide alive and working. And aside from being beneficial for increasing the circulation to your heart, your brain, and everywhere else in your body, the Cialis and all the other pro-erection drugs, pro-nitric oxide drugs, will make nitric oxide last substantially longer, because right now, once you hit 40 or so, you started making a lot of a little enzyme called PDE5, which kills nitric oxide so as to constrict the blood vessels to your heart, to your brain, to your lower extremities, to wherever. If you can fight that, you'll be healthier. So it's not only good for your sex life, it's good for your life overall and for your health overall, to increase the circulation, to increase the amount of blood that gets into all of your vital organs, especially your sex organs. So get your hormones right, reduce your estrogen, increase your progesterone, reduce the prolactin, increase the nitric oxide, and go force yourself to have fun. Any gal who thinks she can hang on to her husband and not renew the oxytocin bond is either dealing with a man in his 60s or 70s or 80s, or she's being foolish if she's dealing with a fellow who's more or less her contemporary in age. And on that note, I wish you all God's blessings. Be well. I'll chat with you again next time. Bye-bye.